When it comes down to brownfield policy, there has been a lot of change. Particularly, there was a lot of question marks this morning about the register. How much of it is idealism? How much of it is some policy wonk stuff? In the end, for obviously for our audience here, how much of it do you think is actually doable? Who's up for going first?
Well, I'll go first, because if you've got £1.2 billion, which actually, given that Carney's just announced 250 billion injection, is peanuts, I'd kind of like that to be spent in the right place. And therefore, we need to know where our brownfields are, and listening to the long list of stuff going on in Newham, some of which I've worked on, it's really important that we invest, not spend, because we need to be thinking in terms of a return on that investment, particularly today of all days. So this really, really matters. It matters because we're making policy on it, and it matters because we're spending our money on it.
Thoughts from any other members of our panel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've just started to look at this because we're not compelled to quite yet, but always like to work out how we can, meet government objectives or appear to meet them in terms of what we're doing, and the tension is always that we, in our borough in particular, we have a very firm view of what we want to keep control over and what we want to happen. So that the prospect of these in principle things is not really very satisfactory for us. Plus, we feel like we've done the designation, the allocation, we're doing the selling of it, we're trying our very best to get it going. We are the most knowledgeable about our own area. And the imposition of things, really drives potentially coach and horses through that whole sort of community stakeholder piece of absorbing huge levels of growth. And in the end, the communities have to do that. So I'm not entirely sure if it's just a device to make it easier for parts of the country that don't have so much brownfield, and it's just sort of driving us to sort of bring forward the opportunities that we have, and to sort of suppress the opportunity for communities to challenge it in the way that they do in a lot of shire counties, etc. And we find that tension not to really be acceptable. So we will deal with it in a very pragmatic way that best serves our own local and strategic needs.
Come in, I think you've got a...
No.
The other critical thing here, I came up in the discussions, it was around infrastructure. And getting that done is probably the biggest challenge out of all of that, because you're working with a lot of organisations. So doesn't that mean that everybody involved is going to have to be a lot more joined up, and again have a much better sharing of data, information, and sharing objectives? What's the thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's key. That's probably the best point to really focus the conversation on data is infrastructure, because of the growth in demand for housing. We're in a unique place where we're going to start challenging conventional norms of potentially urban living, for example. So the infrastructure within those locations really needs to be very well understood before we can answer the question on the amount of volume of houses that we can actually deliver. It's going to be one of the key drivers for it, and I think dependent on the capacity for that infrastructure and that network, it will look to challenge conventional wisdom on how we live.
There's a lot of furious nodding going on here. Do you want to who's going to...
I was going to say about the community infrastructure levy.
Yeah.
Developers now paying for infrastructure, but obviously now there's a disjunct, between money being received by local authorities and the timeline for infrastructure being provided, whether it's in the right time for your development to come forward. And I think there are kind of potential issues there around actually how the levy will be spent.
Jane, you're nodding furiously.
Infrastructure is obviously the key to unlocking sites, because some of these brownfield sites are quite inaccessible. There's several good examples around the country. West London, I can think of one, York, where a large brownfield site is completely surrounded on all sides by railway lines, and without access across, although that's good infrastructure, it doesn't give people access to the site, so that's also important.
Any other thoughts on infrastructure?
I think just on a very, very simple level, people form habits incredibly quickly when they occupy new developments. And if that infrastructure isn't there to support good, sustainable habits, then you're fighting a losing battle from the outset.
Yeah. Is it also with infrastructure, is it a planning thing? You've got to make sure you get it right. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the really big issue for us is not so much working out what you need, because, inaccessible sites, you need connectivity, and you can flesh that out quite quickly, but it is this funding piece that is really, really crucial. Who pays, when do they pay, and then how do you maintain it? And I hesitate to talk too much about community infrastructure levy, but you do have to understand the financial restraints that local government is under, and SIL is an unhypothecated fund that comes into local authorities. Section 106 is hypothecated, spend it on, the road, This is a fund, comes in, and it's generically supposed to support the strategic sites that you have. We have, as I've told you, so many. The pressures on that fund are immense, and they're not necessarily going to do what you on the other side of the fence think they're going to do for your site, because that relationship that's there with Section 106 between the fund and the site is not there with SIL. And I don't know that that's necessarily been appreciated. In any case, SIL is relatively a small player in terms of, the amount of infrastructure we would need. It's never going to contribute to the degree that it needs to, and you need to keep all the figures up to date. And I'm not sure that everybody has the impression that it's given the clarity and the security that the development industry wanted. I don't know that it's done that, and it's certainly not doing the funding thing either. So it's a tricky one.
Part of our two-hander was a negotiation, so I think you've got an interesting perspective here on. You can go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just interested in what's likely to happen with the HCA's role in acting as developer promoter and bringing forward sites and enabling, particularly with the tricky infrastructure issues. It'll just be interesting to see how that pans out, again, obviously with current circumstances, whether or not funds will still be flowing and where the risk will sit.
And also, presumably, there's the other element here, which is the devolution agenda. So the HCA is basically, in its current form, handing over power to what will be the Manchesters, the Birminghams, the Liverpools, and all of that, and the money is going to go with it. So that's going to be quite a complex thing for an organisation to be both regulator and funder and all of that.
Absolutely.
Paul, you were going to.
Your last one actually is a very pertinent one, because it goes back to decision making. We need to make decisions about our infrastructure in a more timely fashion. We need to realise that we appoint a government to make those decisions, and not everybody's going to like the answers. And they just need to make up their minds, because procrastination is costing us enormously. Where data comes into it, it's both the access and the ability of the data, but also to share it. So you can have an informed debate using electronic means of sharing that information and accessing it. But we must get to the point where we make decisions quicker.
I'm going to throw this out to the floor. So, are there any questions, or anyone got any comments that they feel that they want to share at this point? Some very, very interesting ideas and thoughts from the panel. Go ahead. Yes, we have got a roving mic. There we go.
Thank you very much to the panel, and some interesting presentations this morning. Marco Bulmer from Rodan Research really focused on climate change adaptation, and I've been involved with the World Bank's programs looking at safe and resilient cities. So I'm very much sitting here connecting with that. I've heard climate change. I haven't really heard so much about the adaptation side. Sustainable Development Goals 11 and 16 are clearly with us, and we've got to get our head around those. I'm really struck, Deirdre, by your presentation. What's the elevation of the majority of your borough? it looks to me as if it's quite low. And therefore, as I think forward and my understanding of sustainability, I'd really like you, if you would, just to pass some comments as to how you think forward with water inundation and a lot of your brownfield sites being on a major river with potentially some substantial changes in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously done our flood risk assessments and they come through in individual sites as well. But we've just actually done a recent new piece of policy, a sort of a subset of our core strategy, which I think really made a giant leap of faith in the sort of engineering of mitigation and how we deal with that in the future, and that we should, you know, all things are possible, because a lot of our very large sites, as you say, that they are all in high flood risk zone. You know, the flood risk map is quite red. But to be fair, we haven't really found that that's been a problem in terms of people coming along to do the development. They've modified, the Environment Agency have been involved, they pushed us quite hard in terms of the requirements of development. And I think we've dealt with it, in all honesty, probably more in that sort of technical way than in the sort of more ideological or philosophical climate change as an ambition. I think it's just about making sure that you've done all you can to make sure that the worst case scenarios don't happen. We've got the Thames Barrier as well in our patch. So we are conscious of it, but I think probably your question's driving at, how high up the agenda is it in the borough as a whole? And I think it's not particularly, in all honesty, because the pressing needs of housing and of jobs, they if the politicians had to choose, they would be top of the pile, and that aspect of it not perhaps getting as much attention. But we have tried ourselves in a professional way to sort of push forward with high quality BREEAM status and trying to generate some very sophisticated, sensitive, flood risk design that's quite unique to the environment that we're in. I wouldn't say that we have any particular examples of that to show you, because I suppose to date people have taken very traditional approaches to it, and it's not something that we are able to put on the table to say, if you don't do it to this degree, you're not going to get planning permission, because the drive's not quite there yet. I think we've gone up a long ways from where we were 10 years ago. But it's not at the heart of driving forward the reason why we're doing development and how we're doing it. But we are bringing members with us on things like you don't need car parking when you're right beside Stratford, which is in the highest P-town you can get. And believe me, we do have to have those sorts of conversations. So, we're on a journey, I would say, to sort of bring people up there. And I'd say in the next 5 years, it will have much more prominence for us as an issue.
Any more questions? Oh, we've burst into life. I'll go over here, and you've got a mic as well.
Yeah, possession's 9/10 of the law, I think.
Not today.
Liam Harrison-Atkins, does the panel think we're seeing an change in our system to provide the growth that we require? So London needs to build, 50,000 new homes a year. We're building something far less than that. So the changes we've heard today, are they enough? And in relation to that and the infrastructure question, we kind of know what's happening for the next 20 years at best, Crossrail 2 maybe by 2033. So is there enough in terms of enablers to help us deliver?
Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'll go. I think that's it's a really interesting question, because I think that's as relevant as it was at the turn of the century, because we've been in a position where we've been asking that question. Is the current system enough to deliver what we need? And it hasn't been for that long. So I was struck by something that Rebecca said, actually, that if there needs to be joined up decision making, we need to talk to each other, because if the answer is that we've mandated 73 councils to go and test how we can come up with these registers, whatever they look like. They're all going to come back with different answers, and then we're going to be in the same position where we've got some stimulus over here, something that's been presented in a different way over here, and it's all going to just keep being fragmented. I think we need to join everything together. So Newham has specific challenges, flood risk, for example, whereas the neighbouring borough would have slightly different challenges. We need to look at the complete picture before we can start answering it, I think.
I think it goes back to your comment earlier about, you know, that sort of joined up thinking about infrastructure planning and timely decision making. You know, we've been lobbying since 1943 for a crossing across the Thames. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, it is woeful. And, you know, you can't blame Europe for that. That's us. We did it. We haven't made the decisions. You know, Heathrow, it's another example. You know, City Airport, we tried to do that in a way that to suppress its environmental footprint with a new application. Everybody was on board with it in a technical way, you know, technical advisors in the GLA, etc., and politics comes in at the last minute and says no. And this is just the pattern that we've had in infrastructure planning. And we have to be honest that that's not working for us. And maybe in the future, where we don't have other people to blame for not European funding something, we've got to do it all ourselves. Perhaps it will focus the mind a bit more. Well, that sounded like a compliment for Brexit, which is not my intention at all.
David Gannicott from Hyde Housing Group, and just building on that theme actually, one of the things that I've noticed over the last 5 or 6 years is the absolute growth of joint ventures, which indicates some good things. I mean, JVs is about spreading skills and improving knowledge, but it also indicates that there is insufficient capacity within the building sector to be able to deliver this lot. I mean, house builders are not going to do it. Housing associations have also got a degree of restrictions on them, given government policy. I just wonder where the capacity, the people capacity, the skills capacity, and the financial capacity is going to be coming from to deliver government policy. And if the panel had any views.
Who wants to leap in on that?
Well, I think you need to start with the word need was talked about earlier on. And I think sometimes we need to recognise that the need and the capacity are in different places. And we need to start thinking like Patrick Geddes was with a big map and saying, is this the kind of footprint that we want our octopus to have? Or should we be looking towards the Northern Powerhouse, looking at the potential in Newcastle, in Liverpool, in Leeds, in Manchester, in all those B towns or between Manchester and Liverpool that I only know about because they're second-rate football teams and I'm a Derby County fan, which is still a second-rate football team. I was wondering whether we're a third-rate, but we're not. And I think we need to think about whether everything has to be in London or whether actually, if we're going to try and be united, we need to realise that we're not in the business of redistribution of surpluses and deficits, which is what you see in the United States, is what you see in Europe, and spread it out a bit. It would also help with some of the resilience. If all your eggs are in one basket, then you're really stuffed when that Thames barrier gets overtopped. And it has been opened or used more and more frequently in recent years, and it's coming up to the end of its lifespan. Never mind Brexit, if that barrier fails, we've got bigger problems than what we're facing this very morning. And we know that we need to replace it. I think relying on engineers is great, but only if the politicians give them the freedom to do something. So I think need and capacity need to be looked at. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this morning, before I came here, we'd launched a skills academy in Newham with some partners with Lend-Lease and Lloyds Bank. And that's about trying to, you know, specifically in construction, given the amount of work that will go on in the borough in the future, you know, ensuring that our local people are skilled up to take advantage of that. But I think your point is very well made. And you know, I have been at numerous events over the last year where, you know, the estimated gap in the construction industry is, you know, 1 million people. I mean, it's enormous. And as somebody did say this morning, you know, we've never had enough people in the, you know, skilled people in our construction. We have relied on migrant labour to come and do the building. We've always done that. I'm the daughter of an Irish builder who came here in the 50s. You know, it's not a new problem, but it seems to have got crystallised really at the moment, and certainly there's a huge issue for local authorities in terms of recruitment of built environment skills, and it's the same in the private sectors that will operate, and as you say in yours. So we're trying to do some stuff on that, and we're trying to get our local people interested in the whole gamut of, you know, from lower skilled to higher skilled ends, and we're trying to do that with partners, you know, apprenticeships, high level apprenticeships and the like. But we're not going to close the 1 million gap. Everybody's got to be doing something similar.
Excellent. Well, that's a really useful and very informative discussion. I think finally, just simply leaves us to thank the panel for their contributions this morning.